this computer. Now, okay, so picking up the recording now about a third of the way through the meeting, we've just had a bit of a reflection on what we thought were the important things that happened in this election, and the things that came out of this conversation for me was really around the fact that the community independents were elected because they're a reflection of great dissatisfaction with our incumbent bad government, that they were well financed, and that they may or may not be a reflection of a democratic sort of upswell in the community, and that there needs to be a lot more research into why people voted the way they did and why they changed their vote. So I think that sort of is a bit of a sum up of the first round of conversation here. G'day, Gilles.
Hello, sorry I'm late. Been a few hassles, but we won't labour that point.
Okay, so the second thing that then arises out of that initial conversation is this idea about him identifying what is important, given what we've talked about in strengthening democracy in our electorates and in the places we live and work. And I think Craig has already raised one possibility, and that is helping voters to get to know the candidates, getting the candidates in front of voters, which of course is what Vote Easy's mission is all about. But we might just go around the group again and do a set of reflections in terms of that. So Craig, given I've sort of put that in there, do you want to pick up on anything about really what's the important things we need to be doing next?
Yeah, look, the most important thing is to understand the voter, to understand the undecided voter in particular, because they're the ones who are basically free-floating out there. They don't participate in anything like this. It's not that they don't care, it's just that they're busy doing their own life, and politics, democracy, whatever, is just not their main topic. As I always say, it's like mechanics. I'm not a big fan of mechanics, but my mechanic is. So he's probably looking at it in reverse and wondering why I don't care about cars. So we've just got to understand that and stop trying to tell and teach voters where they're going wrong, what they're doing. We need to change that way and sort of say, well, having a look at the problem is that they, first and foremost, they find it hard to meet. So both candidates and voters find it difficult to meet. So for argument's sake, at the moment, we've got the South Australian election going on, and we've done something different this time, because in South Australia, the council elections have extremely poor participation rate. And it's a mail-out election as well. We've offered the site free to everybody in South Australia to try and show them how Vote Easy works, and to teach candidates predominantly that you all have one thing in common, and that is you wanting to reach the voter. Now, if we can find an easier way for those voters to find the candidates, well, then that's where we're teaching voters how to get involved in the process. Because if they're not interested in the process, we need to make it easy for them. So by doing that, then when you get people involved in something that's easy, you may find that we can get them to think about other things and go, well, that was easy. Well, maybe I could get involved with this and could get involved with that. So until we change the way we expect our community to communicate at election time, that's why we're continuously having the same problem each election. And then, like I say, trying to understand why they voted the way they did. If it's true that the undecided voters are in the ballpark of 30 to 40%, you're never going to analyse why somebody changed their mind because they didn't know why they made the decision in the first place. And that's the part of when you listen to people, they will tell you, I voted for Albo, or I voted for, they're not on the ballot paper. And the amount of people, once we get out of our circle, and that's what we've got to remember, we surround ourselves by like-minded thinking, or like-minded people. So therefore, we usually get a lot of, and candidates do the same. So they get the information from that one source and believe they're doing the right thing. But in fact, when you take yourselves out of the circle and put yourselves in environments that isn't the norm for you, you'll find that the friends and family who don't pay attention to democracy or politics or anything like that are 99% of the time going to that ballot box blind. And their reasoning could be that I just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's why, if you think about it, that's why it's so important for a candidate to be drawn first. They know they're going to get a percentage of votes just by going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's why I'm saying it's very important for democracy that we get everybody involved, but we've got to get those candidates in front of the voters in front of the candidates. We've got to reverse how we're doing things.
Great. All right. Thank you. Who would you like to pass to?
Oh, I love hearing what Barbara's got to say.
Look, I agree with all that entirely, but I mean the education, you know, in the very broad sense of the word, of voters is just so important, because I mean I'm quite shocked when I often talk, well, I don't often when I talk to younger people who say they're either not interested in politics, or they just feel that they've got no power in it, you know. So and that goes right through the spectrum of all ages, really. I mean, I expect more of it from younger ones these days, because, you know, I hope that they are better educated and better informed. But just so many people are either feel powerless, you know, and think, well, what can I do? Or my vote doesn't, you know, I'm only one person, my vote doesn't count. Or else they get very fixated on one particular area of you know, what concerns them. Or I mean, there's a multitude of reasons why people vote the way they do or don't vote. But if they're going in without their minds being made up, you know, on the actual day of the election, I mean, that's really is a lost cause then, because they're just going to vote, as Craig said, either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or just whatever name they happen to know. So I would think that I mean, there's so many really crucial issues going on in the world at the moment, and climate change, of course, is absolutely top of the list. And national security or world security is, I mean, the fact that there's such threats going on between you know, the really powerful countries. I don't know whether this is something that will push people away, you know, and just make them feel even more hopeless, or whether trying to inform them of the really serious issues in the world is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. I think, again, you know, we need to really have some really well-informed ideas about what we, you know, as an organisation or other organisations such as ours can do. We had the Women's Climate Congress last week on Sunday and Monday, and we had sort of general talks on the Sunday, and Zali Stegel was one of the ones who talked, actually. But we on the Monday we mainly had breakout groups, and one of the ones was Emma Fletcher ran, and it was, we titled it where was it? Encouraging citizen participation in governance. And I went to that particular session, and there was some real interest in that. But the discussion got dominated by a couple of very
You're frozen.
Have you been
Barbara.
censored, Barb, or is this just a delay in transmission?
It's not looking good, eh?
I think that's probably censorship.
There she is.
As soon as you started naming the names, Barb, you got censored.
Oh, yeah. Oh, dear.
We are being watched.
Well, I didn't think I named a name. Who did I say? Oh, I said Zali. Zali was one of the speakers at the conference. So, but
No, you're saying in the session with Emma, there was a few people who did something.
Oh, well, they were just they had been as supporters, you know, like active supporters of the teal, some of the teal candidates, and they were just so enthusiastic, just so sure that the reason that they'd got elected because they were just such good candidates, and they weren't willing to sort of concede that a lot of the reason that they got elected, apart from the fact that they did have money behind them, was that there was just discontent with the current crop of MPs. So it was I found it a frustrating discussion because no one else, I mean, everyone was very interested in the subject, and there was some quite, you know, people with academic backgrounds there, who I think were there to, you know, just sort of pick people's brains about what they could then write about. But it was just for the ordinary people who were there in that discussion, I think they were a bit, even though, you know, obviously the people who were at that conference were really interested in climate change, otherwise they wouldn't have been there. But I think they were a bit overwhelmed by the whole thing of how do you get involved in, you know, participating in governance in all its senses. So and you know, and that's with people who are really interested in doing it. So to get people who are either not interested or who don't feel that they've got the confidence, or that they haven't got the talent or the ability or the knowledge or whatever, I mean, this is a big job, and I think we need to have some really detailed and in-depth discussions about what sort of things we can do.
Okay, thank you, Barb. I think it's good to hear that how can we get people participating in government is a topic at a conference that isn't about government.
Yeah.
But who would you like to pass to?
Oh, sorry, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Barb. Peter, just remind me of the topic so I stay on track.
So identify what came out of the previous discussion as important for strengthening democracy in our places and in the ACT.
Okay, that's all?
That's all.
Well, I think when Craig talks about the undecided voter really, you know, drives the outcome of our elections, I think he's got it right. And my daughter is a classic example of one of those, and she's not cynical or you know, disinterested. She wants to use her vote well, but she's not really interested in following it on a day-to-day basis. She's got other things to do in her life. But when she comes to vote, she wants to be able to find out, of the people who you're making me have a choice about, how can I tell the difference between them apart from just their political spin from their parties? So if she could get balanced information about the candidates and what they stand for, that would be helpful for her. And then, you know, she doesn't have to go and do all her research on these folks and listen. And this is I think the most damaging thing in our democracy is how we allow anybody with money to use the media to influence the undecided voter. Because if you don't educate yourself about how you're using your vote, a lot of people end up voting against their own interests. And, you know, that doesn't help democracy at all. And we just get into these bubbles and conspiracy theories and drama and division and all of that sort of stuff. So I think helping the undecided voter without using the media, because it's got its own vested interest in a lot of things. So, you know, websites like what Craig's trying to do and other groups where you can just go and see who the candidates are. And if there was just a template where they, you know, had to explain themselves in some way, not just their character, but the way they're going to vote on your behalf, and people could make a decision about that, I think that would be a really useful thing in our democracy. And I'll pass over to Gilles.
Okay, so I shall be brief because I've got a family event happening right now, but I decided I'd at least pop up briefly during this because it's an important issue. So if you hear some weird noises and voices in the background, that's what's going on. Yeah, basically, I agree with what I've heard from Barbara and Mark. And for me, I suppose, and this is where CAPaD, I think, and others who are all working, we can't do it. No one group can do everything. And we need to have a a network of groups that work together as often and as closely as possible. Each one specializing, I suppose, in particular tasks, because it's that communication between elected representatives and voters that space needs to be filled. It needs to have facilitators, I suppose. We could perhaps see ourselves as, among other roles, as facilitators, is filling in that gap. I mean, this afternoon, David Pocock, about now, he's starting in a few minutes, is having a town hall here in Canberra in the south. And he's been having a couple of those. So he's got off running, and I've noticed that some of the community independents have been popping up in the news, and they're regularly making a point that they are listening to the people who are in their constituency, not necessarily just those who voted for them. And I think we need to be part of that thrust, help it not run out of steam by doing things that establish, and we want to have, well, I see it as needing to have these bridges, communication bridges that are part of the landscape. They become part of the ordinary. It's nothing too spectacular, and that the average voter won't have too much difficulty finding out about how to do this. They may not have one stop, but perhaps somehow they could be a one-stop shop of sorts, or a few one-stop shops that are well advertised, I suppose, promoted, which allow people to get into finding information quite quickly, because nowadays people don't have the patience to spend hours and hours going through websites on a particular topic of this nature. I'm not talking about entertainment and TikTok, obviously. So yeah, for me, I see a role for CAPaD and other groups being in there. And I noticed the purpose of the Zoom event, the things were exploring where we go from here. And
that's the next question.
Think that what happened in the election, because I'm going to have to leave soon, sorry, Peter. What happened in the election really has the potential to really change politics in this place. And that big change is that it becomes part of the modus operandi of elected representatives to think, oh yeah, I need to have much better contact with constituents who are interested, and the constituents will say, oh, I need to get this, there are important things happening, I need to communicate this to my elected representative. How am I going to do that? What's the path? And that's where I see our various roles happening. There we are. That's all I can think of right now. Thank you.
Who would you like to pass to, Gilles?
I'll pass to John.
Thank you. I like Craig's idea of making things easy. I'm very conscious of the fact that people, especially young people, live very busy lives, particularly when they've got kids and the like, juggling all sorts of things. Having the time and energy to even think about broader issues almost impossible. And yet our political system seems to assume that people are going to make an informed vote. How do we get that information? It's very, very difficult. I don't really know that there's any easy answer. It would be good to know more about voters' expectations, which I think maybe implies more in the way of the kitchen table discussions to find out what people are thinking in detail in their particular area. But how we set up mechanisms for this to happen on a regular basis is something I'm just not sure about. But we certainly, if our democracy is to have any real meaning, people do need to be involved, and these are big challenges. I don't really know. I remember years ago when the Senate voting form was changed, there was a big concern that it was all too complicated, but some observers pointed out that the new forms were no more complicated than the average Tats Lotto form that people put in every week. So there's a question about our level of interest in things, so that if someone is interested in a particular hobby where they need to assemble something, they'll follow the most difficult instructions because they're particularly interested. So we're proceeding from the other direction. How do we get people interested? And that is extremely difficult, extremely difficult. I wish I had some clear ideas, but I think discussions like this do help. I don't have any clear ideas except Craig's general idea of how can we make things easy for people. And I'll pass back to Mark.
Or I might jump in if that's all right.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
That's all right. I mean, I actually don't have anything to add. I think the ideas that have come out of this around we need to be helping to inform voters. I think informing voters is a better way of thinking about this than educating voters, because for me, educating has this idea about we're telling people what to do. It's a very sort of pedagogic, didactic model, whereas I think informing voters is primarily what we're trying to do. But I think there is an educational component to this informing, because, you know, people have to understand basic questions like, why does my vote count? How do I fill in a ballot paper so that, you know, my vote does count? The idea of building ways that voters can get balanced, truthful information about the candidates is important. And I think the key thing about making things easy and I'd add, and obvious to voters is clearly something we can do. And I agree with John about it's all, how do we get people interested in this sort of stuff? So I think the third part of this thing was, well, what does CAPaD do with this now? And I think we can build on those expectations or this discussion. I think if we do another round, bearing in mind, reflecting on what we've already said, and start to sort of focus it down on, well, you know, what is it that CAPaD might do? We're not promising to do anything because there's only the 5 of us and a few extra people, but, you know, what are the sorts of things that we might think about doing from now on in? And this will feed into a future Zoom session, which we're going to have in a few weeks that hasn't been advertised yet, around our new education strategy and what we might be doing with our DRG status, were we to get DRG status. So I think we'll go around again and again. I'll start with Gilles because he's got his finger up.
Yeah, I will have to go shortly. I don't know specifically how to say what how we would go about doing. I think there are lots of opportunities, and it's a matter of recognising them. As simple as like this afternoon, Kath in the Active Democracy group down here is going to the David Pocock meeting and is going to try and buttonhole him and talk to people. So it's also, for one, it's piggybacking on existing events, which as much as we can, and things that are happening around the place, around here. Basically CAPaD then defining its education strategy, talking about us. And I'm sure, Craig, your Vote Easy is well on the way and doing some very useful work. I suppose there's always room for improvement everywhere for everybody. Yeah. Yes, I think there's great potential on that. We need, for me, it's using, because we've had very limited numbers of people doing the work. It's useful to use what's happening, and I think the election has resulted in an environment that is far more conducive to doing this sort of thing, and this is the time to to get on the bandwagon. That's all I wanted to say, and I'll have to go now. So thank you, everybody, and
Who'd you like to pass to as you exit?
I'll pass to Craig.
Thank you. Thank you, Gilles. Catch you.
Bye.
That's great. I just the one thing that seems to just keep coming up there is about the voters and about politicians. Once they're elected, we need all we need to do really is to help a lot of the democracy issues that we have after an election is to focus at that point. At which point does all the other issues rely on? And it relies on the voter making the decision at the point of the candidate before they turn them into a politician. So if we, the people like you and me and Ingrid and Gilles just off now and to see David Pocock. Now, if I remember rightly, David Pocock was heavily supported by ProAct. Now, groups like that who are interested in the candidate stage, if we can get them all involved, that group of people who are interested in politics are the people we need to get involved with Vote Easy, so that when we're communicating to voters, when we're showing them an easy way to get to candidates, that is the most important step in the democracy process. From there, going back to what Peter said, it's not about educating voters. First things first, let's get the two connected. Show them an easy way. They're not dumb. It's not as if they don't want to make informed decisions, but then they can read about the candidates, from the candidates, get the information they need, then turn them into a politician. Then the community groups, the kitchen table discussions, the CAPaD way of doing things come into effect. Then what happens is we then get our representatives to actually start to represent and listen to us. Now, if they choose not to listen to us once they're elected, well, guess what? We do the process again. And in fact, you don't have to wait till the next election, but that's another conversation. But that's how we've just got to look at step one first. If we want to look at all the other democracy issues, unless we're electing the right people for the job in the first place, you're not going to be able to address all the other democracy issues. So how do we get people involved? Let's get them they've got to vote anyway, it's compulsory. So we've already got their attention. We have to get them to the ballot box. That's step one. So that's already done. Now we actually have to get them to pay attention to who they're voting for. That's the hardest part, because at the moment, we don't have the voters going to the candidates. We have the candidates going to the voters. And that's very expensive, very hard, and they will not get to the undecided voters because the undecided voters aren't engaged. So that's why we need to reverse it. But we've got all the answers to the other issues are here. We've just got to get step one completed, and that's them connecting at the ballot box. That's the key here.
Thank you. Who would you like to pass to?
Oh, Barbara, I'm sorry to pick on you, but I'm going to do it again.
Look, this sort of makes my mind boggle, because there's so much that needs to be done or that could be done, and there's so few of us to do it. I don't know, sometimes when I talk to younger people, and not necessarily, like even people in their sort of 20s and 30s or so, it's not that they're uninformed, it's not that they're or not interested, but that part, like below a certain age, people don't have that same experience that most of us would have had with the difference between the Labor Party and the Liberal Party, for instance, that we've had quite, we could probably, just off the top of our head, say all the things that Labor has done, all the Liberals have done over the years that we've either agreed or disagreed with, and we have a particular fear, that most of us would have probably voted one particular way most of our lives, that we've never been swinging. Well, I shouldn't have said that, but I've certainly never been a swinging voter. And but all of that sort of ideological basis isn't meaningful to a lot of younger people, especially if you're even younger than 20. So that I'm not sure how you approach the sorts of things, you know, how you present the sorts of things that we think are important for people to be doing. Are we going to keep just focusing on the importance of being well informed yourself, of having you know, some serious ideas about how you think a country, you know, your country should be run, the whole business. I mean, when you think about it, you know, there's education, health, national security, all the business about integrity and non-corruption. There's a huge, they are huge topics, and for people to feel that they're well informed and know how to vote for a candidate, this is a big ask for them if they don't have that sort of background where they've always been involved in things of a political nature, if you like. So I'm really not sure what the answer is for us. I think we need to decide just what we want to focus on, what aspect of how we want people to be informed and how to vote, and whether they should vote. You know, I think we need to really come down to some nitty-gritties on what we want to focus on.
Okay, thank you, Barb. Who are you going to pass along to?
Oh, sorry. Has John spoken? Has it?
Oh, well, I'll have a go. Apart from who we elect as a candidate, I do like the idea that Mark mentioned of the citizens' assemblies, so that once they're in office, members are regularly getting ideas from people in the community about what's of concern to them. And I think this feeds back to things like kitchen table. I think that has to be part of the mechanism, but also one of my big issues is this question of architecture of our democracy. Things like present issues are donations and the integrity issue. They're big issues for me. I see the way ahead as starting a round of kitchen table meetings and feeding findings from there into a wider group across the community, which in turn would feed into local members. That's the way I see the way ahead.
Thank you, John. Who would you like to pass to?
Well, Mark, if he hasn't already been dobbed in.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, I'm sort of seeing this this landscape of players, and it can always be framed as complex, but I think, you know, Craig's language is really helpful. Like, the key constituency is the undecided voter. Because if you're a decided voter, you know, you don't need someone to try and convince you of something. All you're going to do is just have a ding dong on a 5, because they've done the thinking to get to their position. But the undecided voter genuinely has some curiosity about what they're going to do. So, and just this language, so you can educate them, which I agree with you, Peter, is a patronising term. And it puts people in their box, and it says that we're going to tell you what to do. You know, informing people is another way of framing it, but helping people learn what serves their best interest, you know, that's giving them agency to do what they want to do. So I would say what I'm interested in is helping people learn, you know, when they're ready on their terms, you know, with the issues that are important to them. Hang on, I've just got a phone call coming in. I'm just going to turn this off. So once you've worked out that you know, you're an undecided voter and you'd like to get some learning about how to make a wise decision at the time when you need to, you know, whatever it is, there's a pathway to get that. And it's available all the way across Australia, and you can do it whenever you like, and you know, you get what you need. now that might sound like a really complex system behind all of that to get that happening, but in some ways, even just the basics of doing that would be good. And the thing is, it's only good to do that just before an election. So that's your democracy. If you don't use that opportunity, then you're stuck with the candidate that you've got in your community. But you don't want to abandon ship on that at this stage. You want to then sort of say, well, what can I do then to make a difference after the candidate's been chosen and I'm unhappy with it? You know, and there's a set of tools and processes that you can do for that. And it doesn't have to be too complex, but, you know, if you've got someone like David Pocock, who's putting a lot of energy into it, you know, he wants to listen to people. So he's going out of his way to make those tools and processes available, like he's doing town hall meetings or whatever he is. He's trying to listen to not your usual suspects. He's trying to bring people into the fold. Usually experienced politicians get a bit exhausted with that after a while because it's the usual suspects. So you always want to have these things fresh and engaging, I think. And I think the role for groups like our groups who are trying to be non-party political and trying to equip both candidates and communities to be able to travel through this landscape in ways that are easy and you know, everyone gets their needs met, and it's self-fulfilling. So it's once people have got a taste of it, they say, this is good, I want some more, and they tell their friends. So it becomes a viral sort of thing, not a painful you know, burden that you have to go through. And it's simple. I mean, that's if we could create landscapes like that, and what it is then we can deal with the media, like Murdoch and the Daily Telegraph and all the media and the news and even the ABC. They all have stereotypical ways of treating the electorate. You know, it's patronising, it's pigeonholed into certain things, and you know, it's propaganda and it's public relations for whoever their influences are. And we're even seeing that in the ABC, even though, you know, they're better than some of the others. But if you could have you know, other sources of information that were, and it's always who's the arbiter of what's high quality information that's you know, unbiased. But you know, like Wikipedia and things like that have had a long history of being effective community governed and self-organizing systems of coming up with the right data. So I don't know how that would play out in this space, but you know, there's always going to be a question mark against the information that you're getting from whatever source there is. But if we can give people critical thinking tools and ways that they have more agency in doing stuff, then you know, we can bring the focus of democracy down to the undecided voter. And I think the undecided voter is a person who deserves a lot of respect and be treated with you know, because they really dictate the whole course of what goes on. They're the ones who decide what government we get. The decided voters aren't the ones who are going to make that difference. It's the undecided voters. So and not belittling them or diminishing them or saying that they're hopeless or they're ill-informed or labeling them because they're not politically interested, but giving them the respect that they're due and the tools for them to be effective. I mean, I think that's an exciting game to activate undecided voters. You're going to transform, you know, there's going to be a lot of people who get their nose out of joint when undecided voters get out of the box that the vested interest have already got them working in. So, you know, that's an exciting game to play. And it is one where you're not educating them or informing them, you're helping them learn about their own capacity to make a difference in the world. That's exciting stuff. So that's what I think we need to do. I'll pass it back to you, Peter.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just writing some stuff down here. All right. So we've got 15 minutes left because I want to sort of try and keep this to time. What I might do now, I mean, we've had a fairly good discussion where we seem to have crystallized around some sort of key points around undecided voters and equipping them and helping them learn to use their, I mean, this is not what Mark said, but their sort of agency and power in the system, recognising that they're the people who at election times are likely to move elections, and that there are some electorates that have more or less undecided voters in them than others. But I think one of the learnings from the last election is that even when you have an electorate that you think doesn't have any undecided voters in it, or even some really decided voters in it, these decided voters can change their mind if there's the sufficient impetus and reason for them to do so. So I think in terms of how this feeds into what CAPaD wants to do next, I think it's fodder for thought for when we have the conversation around what we're going to do with our education strategy later on. What I might do now, starting with John, who's got his hand up, is just sort of go through another sort of set of just giving everybody an opportunity to think about if they want to add anything to what's already been said. So, John.
I accept that what's been said about candidates, that's very important, but also recognising that we've just had an election. So certainly looking forward to the next 3 years, the question is what can be done with the politicians we've got? And that's where I see a need to provide stimulus in a way, information. If members of parliament know that people are interested in particular issues, I think that would be very helpful in them guiding their general direction in what they do. So I see that as a focus in the way forward now.
Mark has this very good analogy of, with the latest election, lots of MPs have discovered the hot breath of democracy breathing down their necks. And this is one of the reasons he hypothesises that Alicia Payne and maybe some of the other MPs are very keen to start engaging with their communities. And I think you're right, John. One of the things we want to do is and this builds on the active democracy work that CAPaD is supporting. It's how do we actually help electorates work with their MPs between elections as a separate thing to how do we actually change the MP if we want to at elections.
It was a few years ago, I went down to the Indi workshop or whatever it was, and that was a fascinating day when people discussed what had happened there, and they spoke about the tremendous buzz of excitement people would look forward to Friday nights when people would get together. There was a real buzz around the place, and people who you might think were fairly conservative, stuck in their ways, were really getting involved in things about all sorts of issues that were of concern to them. And I wonder if maybe someone from Indi might be able to come along and talk to us and maybe shed some light on their process, which involved kitchen table conversations. But that I was quite taken with that sense of people really feeling such a stimulation, that almost a sense of excitement. There were things they could change, and I think that's something we're sorely lacking.
Thank you. Who would you like to pass to?
Oh well, whoever. Barbara, I'll dob her in.
I went to that same workshop down at Indi. That was fascinating, because it was so new, what they'd done, and there was such excitement. But that's partly what I was saying happened at that session we had at our conference, climate conference, that people were still being very enthusiastic about that process as opposed to what the actual candidates were. So I think, there's two things to look at there. One of the things that I think, I agree with Craig about all the undecided voters, but I think there's another category, and I think amongst especially amongst younger people, they're not undecided. They're quite well informed, and because they don't have a particular preference for a party or any candidate, what they're waiting for is to be, or not waiting, but what they're hoping for is to be persuaded by the candidates about that the candidates are really worth voting for. I mean, they're not undecided in the sense that they don't have any information. They're really looking for information and persuasion that whoever the candidate is a good person to vote for. I mean, a good person, good politician to vote for. I think so that, you know, that's a whole different category from people who just haven't made up, or you know, don't have enough information or don't care enough to make up their minds. And I think that's an increasingly large percentage of the uncommitted voters. I mean, when you look at what happened in Dixon, Terry Butler's electorate, that she lost to the Greens in Brisbane. Yeah, what was her electorate?
I think she was. I think she's South Brisbane.
Whatever she, but anyhow, she was a good member. She didn't do anything bad, and she was quite popular amongst them. But that's an interesting electorate in that there's the people there really felt that they wanted someone who was really going to do something about the environment and climate, and they voted Greens. And it's that sort of thing. I think they weren't an undecided electorate. They were an electorate who had people who did actually have some knowledge and and sort of education in the formal sense of the word, and they made up their minds in a way that was was quite a shock to people. So there's
democracy.
Well, yes, but you want informed democracy. So I just think we need to look at all the different categories of whatever we're going to focus on. There's a lot of different types of voters that we need to be distinguishing between.
Okay. Who would you like to pass to?
Oh, sorry, Mark. Yeah.
Just remind me of the question again, Peter.
Well, we're having a sort of a not quite a wind-up reflection on what's happened so far this afternoon. So just if you've got anything to add to anything that's happened earlier on.
Okay. Well, at this stage, all the candidates have been chosen. And so my energy is going to go in helping Democracy Co, that's Emma and Emily, do pro bono work for MPs around Australia, and they only want to do it with 3 for free. And one of them we've got in my electorate, and it'll start off with a survey to all members of the electorate, like paid out of the MP's budget, communications budget, which is a pretty generous gift. And then they will identify the issues that are important to them, not based on the party politics sort of stuff like Sophie Mirabella did when she went to Indi and just, got people to tick a box that sort of favoured her predispositions already, that sort of stuff. And then a randomly selected group of 40 members of the community will meet together before Christmas and then start to work next year. This project will go for 6 months. And hopefully what we'll try and do is build a kit that we can, it'll be open, like in a way, it's intellectual property that'll come from Democracy Co. But if we can make that more freely available to communities and their members of parliaments to use with resources that come from their local community, this is after you've selected your local member. Now, when the local member has got a contested issue that's highly political, and if they went one way or the other, they're going to end up with unhappy constituents and be seen and get either wedged or you know, hard done by. If they wanted to use an open, transparent citizens' assembly process, then this tool would be available for any electorate around Australia with using local resources and local sponsors, you know, local clubs or community groups or organisations or institutions that want to support it. And hopefully we even get the local media in who aren't looking for the blood and guts stories, but who are looking for stories of communities operating with their own agency and well-being for the good of the future. I mean, not all media wants to tell those stories, but, you know, educating or informing or helping people learn about how democracy can work more effectively. So, yeah, I'm sort of keen to see how that goes and have that expand. And I'll pass on to Craig.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Just a few things. As far as Vote Easy and CAPaD, you know, really enjoy coming together and having these chats. And there's anything obviously we can do together to help improve democracy and get other democracy groups involved and more people involved. And like Barbara said, yeah, there's only 5 of us here today, but it's not the point. The 5 people, it's 10 people, it's 100 people, it's 70 million voters. You know, we can get there. We just got to get the like-minded people in the same room. So tick box number 1. Going to Barbara, I think generally we'd love to catch up, you know, after the event and have a chat, because I think there's a lot of things that we can do to help, or I can do to help that frustration that you have. I've been there, I've done it. That's why Vote Easy exists. And I can and work through with you and that and help bring those groups together and so that you can go on and show people what we can do as individuals. The things like you're talking about Terry Butler, that area of Griffith, it turned out that's the seat she was in. That area is slowly at council level becoming green. Just, you know, similar to Melbourne, starts here and then the next one doesn't. And so what happened is I genuinely think that comes back to that she was just a victim of the anti-majors. And because we don't have a teal and there wasn't strong independence or anything like that, the people just were looking for that difference. And because it's Labor to Greens isn't a big jump. And I just see that, in our opinion, from a voter's point of view, that she just became a victim of that. Because you're right, from a candidate's point of view, she was okay. And I think genuinely just became a victim because had she not been in that seat, I'm pretty confident that she would be fine. But that's the general gist of where we're at. I see, you know, we just got to get the people who care involved a bit more to help those. And back to what you said about undecideds, we only call them undecided voters because that's what the mainstream and the media call them. You're 100% correct. They're not ill-informed, misinformed. They want to be involved. It's just that's the term that's used for basically people we don't know what are going to do. They're freelance, if you get my drift. So that's why I'm going back to what we're talking about with Mark, is it's important to get them in front of the candidates and get the candidates in front. They've got to get to connect. We get them to connect, they will go through those candidate campaigns and they'll go through their information, they'll read up and they'll make that informed decision. So what we say about an informed decision is, have they considered all the candidates and made an informed decision? So it's not that they're not involved in politics or interested in their community. It's just that they're not connecting with the people they need to vote for. It's not a topic that they deal with daily. So when they turn up to the ballot box, they don't know who they're voting for, the names on that ballot paper. So whoever's left to go, Pete, I'm happy to hand to.
Thank you.
Or John, or...
Yep, I think we're back to me. I just observed to John that with, at the moment in the ACT, we've got active democracy bean is, Kath Blunt has set that up as a way of beginning to think about this sort of Indi model, kitchen table conversation, report back to the community, report back to your MP process happening in the electorate of Canberra, the Canberra Forum that Alicia Payne's running, that Mark has described, is a sort of alternative model that we're playing with here to sort of, look at the different sorts of processes that might work to involve and engage and voters and the community in participating in the political process. There's nothing to say that in the electorate of Canberra or the electorate of Fenner we couldn't set up an active democracy Canberra or Fenner group as well. It just depends on the energy of the people. So, CAPaD is really happy to be supportive of this, and if we have the capacity, we would love to be able to run these things. But we're sort of, at the moment, we're doing what we're doing. So, opportunity is here when you get back to jump in and give it a go.
Amen.
Anyway, look, thank you all for coming. I don't really have anything to add. I think this has been, for me, quite a stimulating discussion and has led to lots of ideas, which will, I think, inform where we go next. I don't see this as an end point. This is a way station on a journey of trying to work out what CAPaD does along the line. So I think it's time to wind up. I will just invite you all to very briefly just say one or two words, and I literally mean one or two words, about how you've found this afternoon. I'll start it by sort of excited and informed, I guess I'll say, and I'll pass to Barb.
Yes, informed and hopeful. And I'm sorry, Craig.
Always encouraging. Always encouraging. John, you there?
I'm feeling encouraged.
Mm.
And by logic, Mark.
Mark.
Yeah, I'm grateful and connected. Thanks very much. And democracy in action.
Amen. Amen.
So thank you all for coming, and we'll catch you all up in various guises and places and forums down the track.
Can I
Thank
just
you
say
all.
something? Oh.
Yep.
I was just going to say something about David Pocock. Did you see where he said, when they said Parliament might be quite scary for him, and he said, I've faced the All Blacks dozens of times. Parliament's not scary.
That's a good place to end it.